I'm here in the London office of Numismatica Ars Classica to share with you some of the great masterpieces of classical Greek coinage. The coins of the classical period, that is, the period between roughly 480 and 323 BC, are often considered the most beautiful ever produced, comparable in both style and achievement to the masterpieces of classical Greek sculpture. So, you've seen the Elgin marbles, the sculptures of the Parthenon. These have the same wonderful characteristics, the lifelike, the verisimilitude, the movement, the capturing of the essence of a subject, but in miniature on the disc of a coin. So, without any further ado, let's get started with this lovely tetradrachm of Rhegium. Now, Rhegium, that's in the toe of Italy, one of the Greek cities in Magna Graecia, minted a fine series of coins around the end of the 5th century BC. And one of them included this. Here we see the head of Apollo, very finely done in classical style. So you can see how realistic it is. The god's hairs are worked out. His face is very finely modeled. Now, in the reverse, we have the mask of a lion, which is the symbol, or was one of the symbols of Rhegium. Now, I use this coin as an example to show you how each coin has, usually, the symbols of its city, its patron god, or in this case, a lion mask, along with these very finely executed portraits, which make each Greek coin of this period distinctive and truly remarkable. So, moving on to our next example. This is also a tetradrachm. That is a large silver coin used often for trade because they're big and heavy, can be used to pay large sums. The famous owls of Athens are tetradrachms as well. This one comes from Amphipolis in northern Greece. It was a colony much fought over during the Peloponnesian War, as those of you who read Thucydides will recall. Now, later, in the mid-4th century BC, Amphipolis struck a fine series of silver coins, which included this one. And here, on the obverse, we have the patron god Apollo, worked as you see in fantastic detail. The locks of his hair are almost flowing as you look at them. See also how high the coin's relief is. The god's face projects far beyond the surface of the coin. This coin will wear down pretty quickly. This one's in very fine shape as it was buried quickly or lost. Something else happened to it. But it was beautiful from the beginning and illustrates how Greek cities often competed, in a way, through their coinage, in trying to have the most visually striking, so to speak, instances of currency. The reverse of this coin has a torch, but a torch whose flame is being pushed back, so it's being carried forward as in a procession. And the thought is that this was a procession, a torch that was carried for the god Apollo, or a ceremony for the oikos, the founder of the city, and borne aloft so that the flame would stream backward, as you see on the reverse. Now, I have here one of the most famous of all classical coins. This is a decadrachm of Syracuse. You'll see these often as headlining items in coin auctions for a very good reason. They're very large, very well preserved often, and very beautiful coins. They're minted around the end of the 5th century BC by the tyrant Dionysius of Syracuse. Now, Dionysius came to power just before a great war against Carthage, and it's thought that he issued these coins to commemorate his victories against Carthage in that war. But there's some dispute over that. He was an interesting character, Dionysius. He had cultural pretensions. At one point, in fact, he's supposed to have died after a great drinking bout after one of his tragedies won in a competition. He was so thrilled that he hit the bottle a bit too hard. But before he did that, he produced some wonderful coins, including this one. Now, the decadrachms of Syracuse were produced by two master engravers, Cimon and Euanytus. This one is thought to be an anonymous issue of Cimon. It's not signed, but it's in his style. All of these coins, whether by Cimon or Euanytus, have the same characteristics. On one side, we have Arethusa, the nymph who was the patroness of Syracuse. There was a spring in the center of the city that was linked with the nymph. Around the nymph, and you see again her portrait is lovingly done, are 4 tiny dolphins, which frame her portrait, 4 leaping dolphins, which were another symbol associated with Syracuse. But the most famous side of this coin, or the more famous side of this coin, is this one. And this shows, as you see, a driver with a chariot. And the horses are in full flight. You see that the driver's straining against the reins as the cart hurtles forward. And above him, Nike, the goddess Victory, holds a wreath to crown him for his prowess. Below this scene, which seems to be a symbol to symbolize victory in the generic sense, we have a trophy, spoils of war. You see in the excerpt there, the space below the charioteer. And this is thought to represent that victory over Carthage that Dionysius won. So a wonderful coin and a real privilege to hold. Those of you who are familiar with American coin collecting, it's about the size of a Morgan dollar, but much heavier. Moving on to the highlights of our little showcase today is this wonderful gold coin, a stater from Panticapaeum. Now, Panticapaeum, I never know the diphthong, is, or rather was, a city in the Crimea, a colony of Miletus planted on the north shore of the Black Sea. The cities of this part of the Greek world were peripheral in every sense. They were remote from the centers, they were a long voyage from anywhere important, and they were subject to raids by the Scythians, the steppe nomads who lived nearby. Now, Panticapaeum was not an especially noteworthy city for most of its history, but it did export grain in large quantities to Athens and other cities of the lower Greek world, where drought was more common than up in the north. And so the reverse of this coin shows both a griffin and a stalk of a bit of barley ear. The griffin, it reflects the supposed griffins of the steppes who lived, they thought, in Scythian territory just to the north. The barley ear, of course, refers to the corn, the various grains they exported south. But the most famous aspects of these coins are in the obverse, where we have a satyr. And satyrs were woodland creatures, minor woodland divinities who were part goat, part man, symbolized the bestial energy of nature. They were very amorous creatures, never come off well in myths. But they do come off pretty well in this portrait. You see, this is a very famously expressive portrait with the downturned eyebrows, and these coins command very high prices. Now, the reason satyrs appear on these coins, which is pretty rare in Greek coinage in general, is that the second king of a dynasty that based itself in Panticapaeum, the Spartacid dynasty, was named Satyros. It's kind of a pun on his name, it's thought, to have a satyr on the obverse of his coinage. And so for much of the 4th century BC, satyrs appeared, and these are treasured by collectors. But there's one issue in particular, which is valued above all others, because a master engraver was employed by the Spartacid kings of Panticapaeum to produce this coin, this stater. It's the same size as the others, the same basic design, but in this case, the satyr's head is turned 3/4. So instead of a profile, we have, with the face turned and the nose pointing out, we have him kind of facing obliquely towards the viewer. And this portrait is incredibly expressive, even by the standards of classical art. His eyes seem alive in a way that's very rare for any coin of any era, but especially for classical coinage. He seems almost like anticipating something, as though he looks back at you when you're looking at him. And this wonderful characteristic of this coin has made it one of the most valued and most cherished in the entire Greek series. When this coin goes on auction in a couple weeks, it will almost certainly fetch well in excess of $1 million. And whatever lucky collector gets it will be very fortunate, because this is, without a doubt, one of the great achievements of Greek art and a fine example of Greek classical numismatics.